When it comes down to Calgary campaigns, it's going to come down to, in some cases, hundreds of votes, or at the very most, a few thousand.
Joining me this week, the final week of the campaign, Conservative strategist Amber Ruddy, Liberal strategist Jessie Chahal, and NDP strategist Zain Velji. And Zain, I'm going to start with you because I expect you're able to give us the most dispassionate analysis of where the campaign stands because your party really isn't in the race right now. Are you seeing anything that gives you reason to think the Liberals won't win on Monday?
I'm seeing a couple of things recently that if they were to have landed a couple of weeks ago, possibly, but the short answer to your question is no. I feel like a lot of this is baked in. So even with the news coming today of the 51st state being mentioned in the first Trump-Carney phone call, that could have the makings of something around trust around Mark Carney and reliability on the guy who's been promoting trust and reliability. But there just isn't enough time on the clock. I feel like we're at this point right now where so much is already baked in, and things take, as I've said often on this show and other places, soak time. And anything that comes out earlier than even today, but this week, requires soak time. So unless it's flashy and a singular issue that captures the attention in a 12-hour period, I think we're baked, Rob, and we're heading to the conclusion here.
Amber, I suspect you want to believe that it's not baked yet. Do you see anything that leaves you hopeful that the Conservatives can still pull off a win?
Well, I think in terms of the advance voting numbers, it is very positive. It's kind of interesting that the Liberals are claiming that as a victory and the Conservatives are claiming that as a victory because Conservatives tend to vote in big numbers on election day. Sometimes there's a bit of reluctance of what could happen to your vote before, which is unfortunate, but it's true. And I think in terms of what's going on with the platforms having come out kind of gives everybody in the undecided camp a little bit of time to look at that. But and frankly, in terms of the voter efficiency, it's going to come down to how organized the local campaigns are to get out their vote and how they're able to do that. And I think it's very possible that the Conservatives still come out ahead.
Okay, Amber, staying with you for a second then. Do you think that Pierre Poilievre can do anything that he hasn't done already to boost his numbers? Is there enough runway left for a game changer? Or is it best that everyone, including the core team there, focus on get out the vote in the ground game?
Well, we have seen the gap narrowing a bit in some of the polls, and I think the fact that the Conservatives do have an aggressive agenda, of course, for the final week of the campaign, the whistle stops, the excitement that's building at some of those rallies will give a bit of a shot in the arm to those campaigns that are in those swing ridings. It is interesting to see, in the GTA and the BC ridings that are really can make or break the election one way or the other are tight. So I think it's a lot of momentum from what I've seen in some of the door knocking that I've been doing on the ground, that it is very possible. And I'm excited by the amount of enthusiasm and energy that I'm seeing the campaigns pull out in these final stops.
Jessie, if the Liberals don't win, it would mark the biggest polling failure at the federal level Canada has ever seen. That said, we have seen polling failures before in this country, south of the border. So I wonder what's keeping you up at night right now.
I think what's keeping all candidates and campaigns up at night right now is that there's a lot that can happen from now until E-Day. And a lot of that work needs to happen at the grassroots level. It's all about focusing on the fundamentals, which is voter identification, persuasion, building the strongest GOTV campaign and team that you can to be able to mobilize your support. So when it comes down to Calgary campaigns, it's going to come down to, in some cases, hundreds of votes, or at the very most, a few thousand. And so what's keeping, I think, all Liberal campaigns up at night is ensuring that they're focusing on the fundamentals and taking care of what they can from now until E-Day, which comes down to IDing and persuasion and GOTV.
Jessie, you heard Zain mention this 51st state stuff. So that had been the ballot question that the Liberals had been riding their numbers early in this campaign up and up around, and they prefer that question, of course. But then things kind of got quiet coming out of the White House, and polling has suggested in recent days that issue hasn't been top of mind for Canadians, as much as it was anyway. And on Wednesday, Trump started talking 51st state again. And today, Mark Carney confirmed a Radio Canada report that Trump raised the annexation stuff in Carney's conversation with him, and Carney came out and confirmed that today. It's been spun a couple of different ways, but I am curious that if it was such a boon to the Liberals out of the gate, why Carney wouldn't play it up coming off that conversation with Trump and try to instill the fear in people and boost his numbers even more. Do you have a theory of mine around that, Jessie?
I think his decision not to spin that speaks just to his approach to the position. I feel that his tone and how he's going to conduct himself is going to be different from here. It's going to be different than previous Liberal governments, and I think the approach that he's taken is one of responsibility. It's what Liberals are seeing across the country as something that differentiates him from his competition, and one that plays to his benefit. So I think what we're seeing from him is consistent with what we've seen up to date.
Okay, I want to talk about what we might see with the new government. We'll put a pin in the strategy stuff, right? We'll talk about that after the vote, and we can break down what went wrong, what went right. But we should take a moment to talk about what Canada could look like under a CPC majority, under a Liberal majority, because the platforms, as Amber pointed out, were released this week, and these are supposed to be roadmaps for the nation. And so in a sentence or two, maybe, Amber, how would Canada change under a Conservative government?
Canada would change for the better. The Conservatives have a plan to make home ownership a possibility again, to cut taxes, to rein in the red tape, and to really focus on get Canada going again. And I think you would see the MPs sitting through the summer, working on a mini budget, getting going right away with the plan that the Conservatives have laid out.
Thanks for keeping it brief. Jessie, under a Liberal majority government?
You're going to see a stark difference between what we've seen in a government led by PM Carney versus PM Trudeau. The difference between the two is night and day. I think that you're going to see a government that is much more disciplined. You're going to see a government that's focused on economic growth. It's one that's going to be more policy-centric, focused on policy execution and a change in how government is managing the programs that they're announcing. I also think that you're going to see a change in tone. You're going to see a change where even ministers that served under PM Trudeau will be approaching their files and their mandate letters in a much more in a much different approach, and it's going to be one that's focused on dealing with the Trump challenge, as well as focusing on the economy and creating jobs.
Zain, we've seen the NDP hold the balance of power over the past 6 years of Liberal minority governments.
Yes.
Polling does suggest they could be looking at a single-digit seat count this time around. How could the loss of the NDP as a power broker in the next parliament change Canada?
A couple of ways. So if we head into a minority parliament situation, more than likely who would form the balance of power at this current stage, if you believe the polls, would be the Bloc rather than the NDP. And so you have this party who is from Quebec, holds a lot of progressive values on social issues, but has some pretty Quebec-centric issues that they care about, including, the state of the country and nationalism overall, holding the balance of power. So you might see, a very different dynamic, at least presenting and rearing its head in a couple of ways in Parliament. And then you have the ongoing conversation of what happens with the New Democrats. Is this a party that has a restart again? Does it have a rebirth in a different way and from a different origin story in its next chapter, perhaps in the West where it's strongest? You look at BC all the way through Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, where the NDP hold very strong positions relatively to perhaps the Ontario NDP and where the National Party seems to gravitate. So, yeah, you will probably see some differences in a minority parliament. In a majority parliament, it's going to be a rebuild process that happens at least for a couple of years, not with a lot of fanfare and spotlight on it for the NDP.
All right, I want to end with the fun stuff, predictions. And let's make this a rapid fire round. So try to keep your answers to a word or two, even shorter if you could, and try to answer with your head, not your heart, as hard as that might be as partisans. Zain, I'll stay with you. I think you've already hinted that you think it's going to be a Liberal win. But what of the question of whether or not it'll be a minority or majority? What do you think?
A slim Liberal majority. I think the campaign got kind of lazy in the second half, so slim Liberal majority is where I'm going.
All right. And Jessie, who do you think is going to win overall?
Liberal majority.
You guys are keeping it tight. This is great. Amber?
I think it's going to be a Conservative minority government.
Interesting. All right. So that raises the question of who holds the balance of power. The threshold for official party status in the House is 12 seats. Zain, will the NDP have official party status in the next parliament?
I think they will. I think they'll hit their 12 plus a couple.
Jessie, whatever the outcome is with this election, do you think Jagmeet Singh's last election as leader, this will be it?
Yes, his last election.
And Amber, if the Conservatives lose, Pierre Poilievre will have blown a 25-point lead and lost to a rookie politician. Will he lose his leadership?
Well, I think Pierre Poilievre has done a lot for the movement. We've seen record fundraising, record involvement, the amount of members he's attracted to the party. He has a fan base that's large. And I think if he loses, Conservatives are going to continue to work hard, and I think
You're
they would rally
ragging the
behind
puck
him.
on me here. Yes or no? Do you think he's still the leader or not?
I think he is. I absolutely do, but I'm still thinking it's going to be a Conservative government. So there's that part of it as well.
Let me throw one more thing at you before we move on, because the Globe is reporting Poilievre could lose his own seat. If he loses that and the election, do you think he'll be able to hang on to his leadership?
I think Jagmeet Singh is going to lose his seat. There's been a lot of talk about leaders losing their seats, but Pierre has put the work in. He's been a good MP for his constituents for a lot of years, and I think they're going to rally behind him.
Okay, I can tell I'm putting you in a tough spot. Let's move on. And let's end with a focus on Alberta. So Zain, one of the safest NDP seats in Canada is thought to be just up the highway in our province. Heather McPherson in Edmonton, Strathcona. Assuming she is re-elected and Singh is a goner, could we see McPherson in the running to replace him?
Sure. She's well liked. She's from the Prairie West. One would argue that there needs to be a rebirth of the NDP with a little bit of that flavor. I think there's absolutely a chance. And if I can just add for a second, if I'm wrong about the NDP not getting their 12 seats, there's a very good chance that Edmonton, of all cities in the entire country, becomes the new NDP power base for whatever that's worth. And so it would not just be her, it would kind of be a movement sprouting out of Edmonton that could be the rebirth of the federal NDP, which I think is good news overall if you're an NDP supporter and want maybe a different flavor of the New Democrats at a national level.
Certainly. McPherson, for one, was supportive of the Trans Mountain Pipeline as opposed to the rest of the caucus of the NDP. So yeah, that would upend things big time. Jessie, I'll end with you. You've been organizing at the ground level, Liberal campaigns across the province. You've been active in BC as well, but let's stay in Alberta. Justin Trudeau had a historic breakthrough in Alberta in 2015, winning 4 seats in our province. Will Mark Carney beat that seat count?
Yes.
By how much?
I'll say 1.
How many in Calgary?
3.
And how much money do you owe Zain if your prediction doesn't hold?
to be determined.
All right. Anything you want to touch on before we go, Amber?
I think it's just fascinating that the NDP think they're going to have a powerhouse in Alberta. How many seats is a powerhouse? 2 or 1 or 2? It's quite fascinating to see. Exactly. Hope they can rebuild.
Okay, Zain, you wanted to get a word in finally?
Hey, listen, I think there's a chance that the NDP keep their 12 seats in official party status. Even if they don't, I think a rebirth sprouting out of the West for the New Democrats, yeah, it sounds like the least sexy political project to work on today. But, look for the next election. There's a ton of room that Carney's leaving on the left with this march to the center right to mimic a lot of conservative policies. There will be a need for a new Democratic Party heading into the future, and one that has an Alberta tinge, I don't think is a bad thing at all.
Jessie, round us out. Final thoughts.
I think that the Conservatives need to be more scared of what's going to be happening internally versus a NDP resurgence from Edmonton. I think that there's a strong likelihood that Pierre could lose his seat next Monday, and what that entails for the party nationally is something that everyone's going to be watching with a close eye.
Good stuff, and good luck to all three of you and your parties on Monday. Thanks so much for taking the time. This was fun.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Rob.